Horse eventually get better through the time, but there is always that feral, a little feral like behavior stays on all their life.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Amplify Horse Racing Podcast. We are excited to be welcoming today's special guest, Noé Tostivint, the yearling manager for Don Alberto Corporation, which is a farm based here in Lexington, Kentucky, and they also originally started in Chile, so they have another branch of their operation down there, but Noé is based in Lexington. Welcome, Noé, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Noé is someone who I met through mutual friends, and it is a very small, interconnected world here in Lexington, in the thoroughbred industry in general. And, as I've gotten to know you, you have such a fascinating story of how you got into the thoroughbred industry originally and your extensive international travels. You speak 3 languages, right?
Yeah, 3 languages. One I forgot, but yeah, 3 useful languages.
I'm sure it would come back if you really. Is that Spanish?
Catalan. That's what they speak in the south of France.
Catalan.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that it would come back if you were really immersed in it. But you
Probably.
have such a calm demeanor about you too in speaking with you, which I could really see that translating into your work with horses. So we're really excited to have Noé on to talk about his role at Don Alberto and also take us back through how he got into the industry. We're going to touch on yearling sales prep today and what goes into that process and actually physically and mentally preparing yearlings for the sales process, because yearling sales season is almost upon us. So Noé, let's start at the beginning. You are from France. And
exactly.
you traveled the world. You made your way to Lexington. How did you originally get into horses?
So I started, all of it started when I was really young. Like I was about probably 10, 12 years old. I was riding in the summer, like for summer camps. And I decided to go to a high school, targeted to the equine industry. And at first, that high school was targeted to tourism. So my project for my professional project was going to be to basically take groups around the mountains to make them see the Pyrenees and all of that. So my path over there was quite far from thoroughbreds. So I studied this for 3 years in my high school, and I was riding a lot at the time. I was mainly riding in show jumping, dressage, doing a little bit of a few disciplines, nothing high level, but a few disciplines. And after that, basically, I had during that time, during those 3 years, I had a few internships, 2 actually big internships of a couple of months, who were in a small place in France, where the guy was mainly breaking horses, and that's the first time I was probably about 14, 15 when I started like breaking some horses. And the guy had only myself, so he was fully able to teach me all the strings and how to do it. And so I spent quite some time. I really enjoyed this. And on the side, I had a little internship of like 1 month in the north of France in a thoroughbred farm. So I was really young as well, around that age, 14, 15, 16. So I really enjoyed at that time. I was really enjoying riding still. I was not ready to do only that breeding side, working on farms. So I was a little bored, when I stayed at that thoroughbred farm. So I left that aside for years and years. And then eventually I stayed on the horse industry, and I went to get my associate's degree, like in animal production. In France, we do not have, like here in USA, like a program only targeted to equine. So I had to study all the animals, that was including pig, cow, dairy cows, and the poultry industry as well. the horses as well. But that was a really general study about every animals we breed basically, and we consume as well. And so I did this, and it's at that time where during that process, I realized the tourism industry was a hard business, was a really hard business and really seasonal. So doing some internship, talking around, and being quite ready to jump into my professional life, I realized it was going to be a hard one to have. It's a beautiful one to be in the mountains and taking people around, but the reality is at the end of the month, you need to meet the ends, and having a job like this, really seasonal, where you can only work 4 or 5 months a year, it's really really hard, because the rest of the time you got to find another job, and to be able to feed all the horses you have for that seasonal job. And because and yes, and this is really really expensive. So I realized basically it was going to be really hard to work, to have a job all year round around horses and evolve around horses, and that was bothering me quite a bit. And I really wanted to work, but also work and make a living being around horses. So I looked around a few places what I was able to do, and I got an opportunity. Somebody offered me a job after my associate's degree over there when I was 19, offering me a job to do a yearling prep. And that person was telling me it was a really cool thing to do. Young people like to do this. You were able to travel if you wanted to, and basically that got me into the thoroughbred industry, and that was the door basically. And I started like 2 weeks after having my degree, and I went on with that farm, and I worked a few months. I did my yearling prep, and from that I went eventually. I left that place 4 or 5 months later at the end of the prep, and I was a seasonal worker. And after that, I went. I met a young guy at the sales actually, who took me below his shoulders and brought me to England, brought me to Ireland, and eventually around those months, I took the decision to leave to Australia, because I realized I needed to speak a better English than what I was speaking at the time, what was totally inexistent. So that what happened.
A quick pause. That's awesome. Like the fact that you had that kind of immersion and hands-on experience with horses from, high school, and being in that type of unique high school environment. Is it common in France to go to almost like a trade type high school where you're that immersed in sort of a career learning setting, or was this school that you were in really unique compared to the typical options?
Yes, there is not a lot actually. I had to research quite a bit. I had to go quite far from where I was living. So I went basically, was still the south of France, but was about 4 hours from where I was living. So at that age, at 14, I had to go there. I was staying there all week, obviously, most of the weekends. And so I was spending a lot of time at the school. Yeah, spending a lot of time, probably going home about once a month. But that was a private school, really small. We were about 200 students altogether, I think, and really, really targeted to the equine industry. So it was basically France. There is all of those general like high school basically, and there's some professional high school targeted to I don't know. You can do like you can become a cook, for example. They have those professional high school to become a cook, or to become what else they have to work in hotels, for example, to work in mechanic, for example. Like all of those hands-on, really really jobs where you don't have to do studies for very very long. They allow you to come in and start learning about that job all year in your student life. Yeah.
So I'm curious, Noé, at what point, like in your later teens, because we were talking before we started recording about where specifically in France you're from, the Pyrenees region, and am familiar, and I know, like, I'm sure a lot of horse racing enthusiasts and people who work in the industry are familiar with, like, of course, like the racing located around Paris, Chantilly, Longchamp, Deauville. But I'm definitely not familiar with what racing, if there is any, is like in the Pyrenees or in Spain. So at what point, like, when did you even go to your first race? Is there racing where you're originally from?
No, there's not. I mean, there's not. You gotta go to. The first one will be Toulouse or Marseille, basically. So that's about 3 hours roughly. 3 hours roughly from where I grew up and was born. So there is not. The first time I went to racing, now I have to think, but I think I was probably about 18, probably 18, 19 was during my associate's degree, yeah, when I was in college. So was really later in life. I mean, around that time, before that age, I was not even considering to be in the thoroughbred industry. That was question mark, but like I was not in there yet. I was not interested by it, and so it was really a process. But the end of my associate's degree, the end of my college, that's when I really started diving into, and I
Sounds
went
like
shadow.
you were hooked, right?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like pretty quickly then you started to, learn about the industry in England and Ireland as well, and then make the transition to Australia, which is
Yeah.
massive.
How did you
But
learn
yeah,
about opportunities in Australia? Like, when did that enter the picture to even go there, work on a farm?
that entered the picture when I started like that summer job, that summer job, that seasonal job, the yearling prep after my college. The guy was a great guy. I still have contact with, who was starting basically his operation. Now it's a lot bigger in France. It's called La Motrée, and he's pretty young. He's probably getting close to 40 now, but when he started, he was about 30 years old, and he was somebody who traveled a lot as well. He traveled a lot doing sales. He traveled a lot working at farms. Traveled a lot in New Zealand. Didn't do Australia, but New Zealand, England, Ireland, and worked a little bit in Germany as well. But he was the one basically who opened my mind, saying, "Hey, if you do this, basically if you learn, like prepping horses here, and you learn, showing horse at the sales, if you can do a lot more. Like you can do a lot more, and you can travel, you can work and travel in several countries, including Australia, and going to the sales and being that guy knew a lot of people outside of France. So obviously, his consignment at the sales was pretty diverse, like about nationalities. He had a lot of Irish and English people coming over to work the sales. So, and meeting those people who were older, most of them were older than me, were telling me as well what they did in their past, where they went. So they really opened my eye about the possibilities, and trying to talk to them. My English was non-existent, and trying to talk to them and trying to have conversation. I really realized my English was going to be a massive barrier for all of this. So and especially when that friend took me over to work for Ballylynch in Ireland, and Jimmy Ralton in England. I knew the job, not perfectly, but I knew the job. So I was able to do the job. It was really hard to explain myself, really hard to understand directions, and any task or anything the person in charge was telling me. So I quickly realized how English was going to be detrimental for a career in that business. And so I did that jump, and I, around the month of probably So I worked in that yearling prep from June to November, and I left November, December. I was in England and Ireland, but by the time I left to England and Ireland, my mind was already made in October to go in Australia. I knew nobody over there, but I already sent out some emails. I was in the process of getting my visa, and it's pretty easy. And obviously they were looking for some people over there, so I was already getting my travels ready around October to be there at the end, right after Christmas, at the end of December. So that's how basically, that's how everything happened.
So what was that transition like to leave your home country and go to Australia?
Yeah, I think it was I think I got myself ready at an early age. I left my home at 14 to go to the high school 4 hours away, where I was going rarely home. I left high school to go to the north of France to get closer to the horse business, and there's a lot more horse breeding farms in north of France. In the south, there is no breeding. The weather doesn't allow it. So at that time, I was 10 hours, 12 hours from home. So I was going home even less often. And the moment, so everything, yeah, I win myself like slowly from my home. So once I decided to leave to Australia, I was probably nervous. I was probably stressed to go on my own as well. But again, was not easy. But looking back, I will do it again. Like looking back, I will do it again, and was the right decision that allowed me to get a lot of experience, and that allowed me to meet a lot of people, and that allowed me to learn English. I mean, when my English was non-existent, was really non-existent before I left.
So did you, just considering that, like, did you just tell yourself, I'm going to do this, I'm going to throw myself into as many conversations as I can and just use immersion to learn the language? Or were you doing any studying as well? Because it is an intimidating process to think about, like traveling to another country that's halfway across the world, and being really challenged by the language. So what was your mindset around that as you were learning?
Yeah, I was never really a big school and language person. I mean, I never really learned languages like in a classroom, and I knew that I wasn't gonna be interested to do it, and I knew I was gonna struggle doing it this way. So I really early on, I really realized I had to be emergent. I had to be immersed, totally immersed, to really learn the language. And of course that came with a lot of difficulties, with a lot of like funny situations, with a lot of struggles, and a lot of headaches at the end of the day. But that was the best way. I mean, I didn't have any chance. I didn't have any choice. I had to learn it, and once you have to learn the language and realize that's the only way to improve your day-to-day life, you just do it, and your brain gets convinced to do it. You don't have any choice, and I think that's I will ask anybody, and I will say that to anybody. I think that's the best way to learn the language, no doubt.
When I studied abroad in Chile, when I was in university, I thought that I had a good grasp on Spanish. I was feeling really good about it. And then my first day that I got there, I got scammed by a taxi driver and lost $300. So on day one, I was like, man, I really have to figure this out fast.
Yeah.
You definitely are going to run into situations like that at some point.
Takes you the hard way.
My grandparents had come to visit me in Paris one summer, and I instead of sending them back to their hotel, which was on the Rue de Rennes, I tried to send them to Rennes So the taxi driver started taking them like outside of the city because Rennes is quite far from
Yeah.
Paris, and it's an effective way to learn.
No, for sure. Yeah, for sure. No, for sure. I mean, happens to everybody. I mean, the process of learning a language, you make a lot of mistakes, but when you look back, it wasn't that bad.
So how long did you end up staying in Australia?
So at first, like visas in Australia for French people are the working holiday visa are a year, and so at first in my mind I was telling myself when I left, let's go for 6 months for now, and I left having already the job. I was going to work for Whedon Stud, so I wanted to finish the season of the sales season in Europe. So my last sale was going to be Arcana in December. That's mares in fall. So and I wanted to spend Christmas with my family before to leave. So basically, that was going to send me to the end of December. So I remember taking the plane like the 29th or the 30th of December to arrive directly to the sales, because at that time they were going to have in January, early January, they were going to have the sales at the Magic Millions in Gold Coast, at the Gold Coast in Queensland. So I basically missed from Whedon, I missed that first yearling prep, like getting them ready for the Magic Millions, and got right away to the sales and worked the sales for them, and then joined the farm. Basically went back to the farm with them, where I stayed for 6 months with them doing all the sales. I was with the yearling division, and after that, because of basically the visa program, they only allow you to stay 6 months in the same. Maybe things had changed right now, but back then it was 6 months in the same farm. So I had to change. So after 6 months, I decided to go to another farm, and I went to a farm in Victoria called Supreme Thoroughbreds. So that was my first year, basically working on the farm, doing yearlings. In Victoria, I was doing mainly fallings over there, and I got along really well. Both of them got along really well with Supreme Thoroughbreds in Victoria. So for them, I stayed even longer. I came back the second year because I was allowed to. When I made my mind staying a second year in Australia, I was allowed because I had more than 3 months in farm job to be eligible for the second year working holiday visa. So I stayed. Yeah, I stayed over there, and even longer. And at the end, I worked for more than 2 years. I worked 2.5 years, I believe, in Australia. The end of the Australia episode, I was going back and forth between Europe and Australia. I was doing the sales. So the last 12 months when I stayed in Australia was 6 months in Europe doing the sales, 6 months in Australia. So that was less farm job than the first 12 months, I would say. But I stayed a total of 2 years and a half, yeah, about that, minus or plus.
How different was the yearling sales prep process and then the actual sales experience itself between Europe and Australia?
I would say Australia was. I would say in Europe we do a lot more variety of things with the yearlings. We do probably more of an individual. At least that's at the farm I worked at. A more individual way of prepping the horses. We don't put them all in the same workout plan. And in Australia was a lot more simple. All the horses were fitting to the same workout plan, and was a lot more easier to manage. And in Europe was more, at least at the place I worked at. Again, like things change between every single place, but was more, targeted to each individual, basically. So yeah, that's how I will differentiate. And everything else on the sales side of things was pretty similar. The only difference in Europe, we do a lot more with the horses in general. We manipulate a lot more the horses in Europe, so they are a lot more behaved at the sales, a lot more easy to be around. in Australia, horses are raised outside. I mean, they from when they're before they get weaned, they get touched for a few weeks. Once they get weaned, they have usually a month and a half where they get touched quite a bit every single day to really put like that human print on them. But after that, from their month, I don't know, month 5, between 5 and 8, they stay outside until they get brought in for the yearling prep. So they live outside 24/7 in every weather. We only touch them, bring them in if they have a problem, or we don't bring them in, but we bring them into some pens for the farrier or for the vet or for any kind of like moments like that in their young lives. So there's a lot less handling. I mean, comparing France, where we touch them twice a day, America, we touch them twice a day, and Australia, where we touch them once a month, there's a big difference. So the process of the starting process for the yearling prep, and then all of their life, it's a lot different. Horses eventually get better through the time, but there is always that a little feral like behavior stays on all their life, and especially when they're young and we bred them. The horses are a lot more difficult to be around.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, because now as we're interviewing you, you're in Lexington, and I know you've been in Lexington in the United States for several years now. How does, so now you've experienced it in 3 different countries. How does the United States differ from France and Australia as far as yearling prep and sales as well?
I would say Australia. I would say between those 3 places, Australia, Europe, and America, we're a lot like Europe. We're a lot like Europe. There is less of a gap about how we do things between here in Europe than Europe and to Australia. Basically, every farm, again, every program is different, and every program is different because of their managers and their way they see their operation. But the traditional way we do things, it's a lot like Europe. The fact we are 6 hours away, a little bit more, 8 hours away flying. Right. The fact we have a lot of people coming back and forth, sharing knowledge, sharing genetics, sharing racehorses. I think that has a big impact on how we do things. So I will say we're pretty similar than Europe.
Okay.
Talk us through the sales prep process that you use at Don Alberto. From the time that you start the prep, how far out do you plan from once you've decided what sale a horse is going to, how many months out do you start the preparation process? And then what does that physical and mental preparation look like to get the horse ready to actually go to a sale?
And to add to that too, I want to know, since now you're the yearling manager, what is it like to be able to kind of mold that process to your liking with all of your experience?
That's a great question. Okay. Wow, Caitlin.
So basically, so I will drink a little bit of water before this.
I'm doing the same. I've got there's something in my chest. I keep wanting to cough, so I apologize, guys.
So basically, the preparation doesn't only start people think everything starts in the summer. There's a lot of preparation to the preparations, and the horses are obviously during the winter looked after really closely during the winter, and fed accordingly to themselves, to their needs, and we try to don't get too far behind as well during the winter and the spring, to basically have them with a good body condition starting the prep. because that's where they're going to start losing weight. That's where they're going to start growing quite a bit as well. So we really watch them all summer, all spring, like with their feed basically to make sure we're not going to be in trouble like in the spring or early summer. So we really start like really early. But the prep itself, I go by my rule. I have like 3 different locations at the farm where I have horses. So and I'm present all the time when they get brought to the walker, when they get brought to those difficult like situations. So it takes me quite a while. Like, and I have an amount of, in average, 60 yearlings to prep. So it takes me an amount to put all the horses into the routine, into the work casual. So I probably start about 3 months before their sales date, basically. So I always work backwards from their sales date. So I will start usually after Derby. I will start definitely Saratoga right away. Saratoga and July. July are the only ones getting about a month and a half, 2 months of prep, just because usually we take really mature individuals. That's a really early sale, and we don't take a shot with horses who have a long way to go anyway. So those horses at the end of the day, if they have less prep, it's not a big deal because we only pick a couple of horses on the farm. Like for a big operation like we only send 5, for example, to July. And Saratoga, we send 5. Saratoga and Kinlan, that's where we have the remaining horses, about 45 to 50, like the last 2 years. Before we used to have a lot more, but basically that's how I time everything. And the reason I start really early, some people start like only 2 months before. It's like I like to give them a lot of time. I to get their fitness together, to get into the routine and be able to basically elevate the intensity of their prep within time, like without doing it too quickly, and leaving them enough time to for their metabolism and their body to be catching up.
I want to mention to listeners, Noé just mentioned a couple sales. He was talking about the Fasig-Tipton July sale, which is the first yearling sale of the year in the U.S., and then the Saratoga sale, which is another Fasig-Tipton sale. For anyone interested in learning more about sales, we did a really good episode with Evan Ferraro of Fasig-Tipton, who talks us through the entire sales season for Fasig-Tipton. There are other yearling sales, including the Keeneland September sale, which is the biggest yearling sale in the world. There are over 4,000 horses that go through that sales ring. And the October sale is another Fasig-Tipton sale. So there are several sales throughout the year, which is what Noé is referencing. But Noé, tell us about the walker. Is that primarily what you guys would use for the conditioning process for horses, or do you do any hand walking as well?
So like I say, traveling the world, I kind of like put in my pot like different way to do things. So adapting from what I learned in Europe, from what I learned in America, from what I learned in Australia. So I'm really big into this, treating every single individual like differently, because at the end of the day, every single horse needs a different program, or most of the horses could have the same program, but there is a certain amount of the remaining horses who need their individual program. So we do the walker. I will say the majority of the horses can be prepped in the walker. That's an exercise walker, and that's pretty easy. We go from 30 minutes to 45 minutes towards the end of the prep. And on the side of that, the ones who have to treat a little bit more individually, we have horses lunging, we have horses going to the long reins, we have horses also only and walking because of several reasons. That can be some reasons of soft tissue, for example, some reasons of body condition. We don't want them to lose too much weight, but we also want them to to get some muscular mass into them. So yeah, I adapt the program towards every single individual, knowing most of the horses get to go to the walker, and the majority, that's just a lot easier nowadays. It's quite hard to get some stuff, and walking horses, it's important. And every single horses are involved at some stage of their prep, but I don't highly and only use this because it's really, really, really hard on the staff. Over here, we have a really hot weather in Kentucky, and if you unwalk all of your yearlings, you end up shrinking your team, your staff numbers to a really low number by the end of the year. So,
I was just going to say, I don't think I've ever been so skinny in my life as the summer that I did a sales prep and we only hand walked everything.
Yeah. No, I do really think we are in 2024, and walking was a big thing, and the horses need to be unwalled to learn how to walk, to learn how to stay straight, to learn how to walk straight and forward, and be good with the handler. They need that process. It's really, 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 really important. But I do it more towards
right at the
Sorry?
sale. That's so important when they're being shown at the sale. If you have
exactly.
a horse
So
jumping all over the place on the lead line, it's hard to see how well it walks.
I agree. Yes. So we definitely do it for every single one of them, but we do it for a short amount of time, and we do it towards the end, and in a more intense way towards the end, closer to the sales date. But I don't think the difference between and walking a horse for 45 minutes every single day and having a horse for 45 minutes every single day in a walker. The horses will gain as much muscle, you will gain as much fitness. So at the end of the day, to my opinion, it's not worth it. Like, that's really hard on everybody. If there's not really a need, we are in 2024. Horses can be in a walker for 45 minutes. Your staff can rest. Your staff can do other things at the same time, and that basically as well, like, that allows you to have a lot less staff. Because at the farm, I do have, in general, I work with the rule of 5 horses for one groom. And if I was happening to do a lot more in walking, I will do probably 3 horses per groom. So that will be an extra in that kind of numbers for my farm. That would be an extra 8 to 10 people. So I will have basically to almost double my staff, and that's a huge expense. And at the end of the day, what you got to gain, I will say it's really, really, really small. I will say really small.
Working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we gotta use technology, and we gotta go with what's out there. Like it's harder and harder to get people to work on the farm. The reality is we do an amazing job, but a really physical and hard job, and the workforce is shrinking. We got to come up with easier way. Not saying like we're going to provide less quality in our work, but saying we have to evolve. We have to evolve to be in time with in time with the knowledge, and in time with what the technology provides for us.
So just to touch a little bit on the sales themselves, what does sales week look like for you guys? Do you work with a consigner to be showing and taking care of your horses at the sales, or do you guys consign your own horses at the sale?
So at the moment, the farm Don Alberto does not consign their horses. We do consign all the horses through several farms in Kentucky, and we have mainly 5 big consigners. So that process basically starts as well early on in the spring. So we meet after with like all of the consigners, each at one, and basically start targeting every single horse to a sale. So where we decide and we decide this with their physical, we decide this with their pedigree, we decide this with their maturity as well. So basically that gets decided around April. We have an idea of where we're going with every single horse, but nothing is totally locked in time. That idea gets matured towards the final decisions towards the end of, I will say, the end of May, and even early June for the horses going in September. So it's really a process, takes a lot of time. We have horses who we think they're targeted for certain sales in April, and in the next month and a half, 2 months, sometimes they grow a lot more, they develop a lot more, they evolve, they improve, they get worse as well. So we adjust those book and sales placements towards basically those last 2 months and through the month of May, and we have a final call around May, early June. We have a final call where everybody's gonna go basically.
It's such an interesting, intricate process, and again, that episode with Evan that I referred to, he talks in more detail about the sales company's inspection process, and them also helping to figure out what horses should be targeted towards which sales. And another good episode to refer people to is the episode we did with Denali Studs, Claire and Conrad Vanderoff, because they do talk more about, from a consignor's perspective, what that process is like. But this was really cool to get, have you share your experience from an actual, yearling manager and what that physical and mental preparation is like for the horses in the lead up to the sales. And I really appreciate you talking about how you handle and approach each one as an individual to
and
make
just
sure
more
that
question before we wrap up, Anise, because I have to know, like, at the end, what does it feel like when you see these yearlings going through the ring and hopefully selling, for a lot of money?
Well, we do our share, we do our part. Like we raise horses the best way we can. We get them ready for the sales the best way we can. We for their future life, that can be physically and mentally. And the day they get sold, well, life goes on, and we keep track of them. We keep track of them through the trainers, through the owners, and we do keep as well as a good number of horses to race under our colors, or to break over here at the farm and basically sell to the 2 years old sales, like during the spring. So I mean, it's sometimes some of them it's a little pat in the back. It's we see you soon for the ones we keep, and the ones we totally sell, and I mean it's a goodbye, but like we're gonna keep track of them and follow what they're gonna do in their future life, in their racehorse life.
Awesome.
Do you have a favorite horse you've been involved with?
We always have a favorite.
Are you allowed to share your favorite?
I don't know if I can share my favorites, but we always have a favorite every single year.
Yeah.
I mean, I have probably, I would say, a handful of favorite every single year with that number of horses. And
it's impossible not to have favorites.
Big things ahead, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's always the case. There's always one. The day you unload it from the broodmare division, you're like, whoa, this guy is pretty special. This girl is pretty special, and you keep them. You keep them in your mind until the end. Yeah, there is always a favorite.
That's
wonderful.
So cool. Yeah, thank you so much, Noé.
Yeah, it was wonderful to hear about your journey from France to now, Australia, now being among the biggest racing in the world at Don Alberto.
Well, my pleasure, and thanks for being part of this, and I hope I answered all the questions.
You're awesome. Good luck with sales season. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.
All right, see you again soon. Yeah, bye-bye.
See you soon.